Hi, everyone, and welcome to the next installment of our interviews with IAPSS Alumni. So as we talked about before, this is part of IAPSS's 25th birthday celebration build-up in 2023. So I'm here with Jannick Burggraaff, the IAPSS President from 2015 to 2016. Jannick, how are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's great to hear your knowledge and stories about IAPSS and how it was about 6 or 7 years ago now. So I guess to get us started, would you maybe be able to tell us about your IAPSS experience? So maybe starting from when you first joined IAPSS through to your term as IAPSS president, and maybe just tell us a little bit about some of the exciting projects you worked on, what you were proud of, what some of the challenges were, things like that. So without further ado, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. So my first experience with IAPSS was the annual conference, which was organized in Rome in March 2013. At the time, I was studying political science at the University of Amsterdam. In my first year, actually, and I learned about this conference in Rome through my local study association in Amsterdam, which was called Machiavelli, and they were planning to send over a delegation to this conference. And well, I'd been to Rome a few times before. I love the city, so I thought, you know, why not? Let's try this out. And well, to be honest, I don't remember a great deal about the academic program of the event, but I do remember having a great time, meeting some really nice people, and I maybe didn't spend so much time with my fellow students who traveled there from Amsterdam, but I got to meet a lot of new people, and that was great fun. At the same time, there was also a vacancy in IAPSS to become study trip coordinator. So as I was, looking up IAPSS in preparation for traveling to Rome, I saw this, and I'd done some voluntary work in associations previously. I had a little bit of experience organizing some smaller scale events, and I saw this vacancy, and I thought, okay, well, that could be cool. Travel, organize study trips with students. So it was actually at the conference in Rome where I had my sort of job interview with one of the board members at the time, and shortly afterwards I got the message that I was welcomed on board and I could start planning the first ever IAPSS study trip. So basically until 2013, at least as far as I know, because of course I only just joined. The event portfolio was mainly limited to these annual conferences where over 100 students would gather at a university somewhere in Europe, 4 days of lectures, panel discussions, and of course social events. And I think it was a very solid format, but at the same time the board at the time recognized potential for trying some new formats of events. And thus, study trips were to be organized. So the very first one was to take place in Brussels, and the plan was to set up a 3-day program with visits to the European Commission, the European Parliament, the Belgian Federal Parliament, as well as NATO headquarters. So, of course, a lot of interesting places to visit in Brussels. And these trips were really about giving students the opportunity to learn in depth about the kind of political situation of whatever the destination was. So Brussels the first time, and there would be typically no more than 25 participants, which meant, of course, the whole dynamic of the event was quite different from a conference with over 100 students. And I mean, it was a new concept. It was the first time that I was to organize a trip like that. So I remember being quite nervous about it, but it turned out really well. The participants were all happy, at least as far as I knew. And I think also that the speakers who we met at these different organizations, I think they liked it as well, because for them, of course, it was pretty cool as well to meet such a diverse international students, for these visits. And I remember on the first trip to Brussels, we had Of course, a lot of the participants were from Europe, but we had some from, I think there were 3 or 4 students from different Central Asian states, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan, and they were keen to learn about the EU because they could, see some, examples perhaps for regional collaboration in Central Asia. So yeah, it was a pretty cool and diverse group. So that was the first trip. Then the second study trip was to take place in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So yeah, quite a different type of trip, a country I never visited. And to be honest, I didn't know that much about it. I mean, at the time of the war, I was still, I think, too young to really notice what was going on. But then, I mean, these trips are an excellent opportunity to really learn about, a country in depth. So it was a bit different from the Brussels trip. I mean, that was only 3 days, but then this trip in Bosnia, it lasted for almost a week. The group was smaller as well. I think we had like 12 participants. And, traveling around that country with 12 students for almost a week, I mean, you get to know each other quite well. And I think the trip made a huge impact just to be in that country, still actually see the scars of the war and the buildings of Sarajevo, and meet with, many people, locals, as well as, foreigners working there in embassies, international institutions, World Bank, political foundations, NGOs. I mean, we had a packed program where we heard a lot of different perspectives on the situation there. But of course, we'd also discuss in the group, what we just learned, and I think that makes these kind of trips so powerful. That it's not just a lecture, but you've got all these sessions and you exchange within the group. So that was great, and that later there would be 2 more trips to Brussels, as well as a trip to Kosovo I would organize, and I really enjoyed doing it. I mean, it was, I think I liked the organizing stuff, but then actually getting to travel there myself as well, that was of course a great opportunity. And then later, my career in IAPSS, I would become responsible for all events, so not just study trips, but also summer schools, which was another kind of new event format. And I was also responsible for conferences, which were taking place twice a year now. And I led the teams that organized the conferences in London and Prague. And yeah, I guess after that, I was elected to become the president of IAPSS in 2015. At that time, there were also some changes in my personal life. So I graduated from my bachelor's degree in political science in Amsterdam. I moved to Copenhagen in Denmark to start with my master's studies. And then at the same time, I got at some point, I got a student job at a bank where I'm actually still working today. And then my final IAPSS event was the conference in Berlin in 2016, where my presidency ended, and basically my active involvement in IAPSS ended as well. So it's quite a few years ago, but it's nice to think back about those days really. And if I just reflect a bit on that whole experience, I mean, it's been if we start with the time that I was president, it came with all sorts of challenges, and it taught me a lot about leadership, because my primary role was no longer to organize specific events and go and do stuff myself, but instead I had a role to look after the entire team, secure we had the right roles defined, recruit students to fill those roles, and I made sure that people were delivering, collaborating in the best way, and staying motivated. and motivation at times could be a challenge because, of course, we were all volunteers. No one was getting paid for the work, even though many of us put in 15 hours a week or more on top of our full-time study commitments. And some of us had professional internships as well. So it could be a struggle to put in the hours that were needed. And over those years I've been active, I've definitely seen people struggle. And nonetheless, I'm very happy about the experiences I've gained in IAPSS, the opportunities that I got. I mean, I put in a lot of work, but I also got a lot in return, a lot of nice experiences and also professional experience that I've been able to use later on in my career. And I mean, in terms of specific challenges, I remember the summer of 2015, I just finished my bachelor's degree. I decided to do something adventurous. I was spending a month in Moscow taking a Russian language course. And 2 months later, we were supposed to have a conference in Prague. And I was president at the time, so I wasn't directly involved in kind of organizing all the details for this conference. But in summer, then it became clear that there were still significant gaps in the program. There were some challenges in the team at the time, and it basically meant that if we still wanted to, have that conference, I had to step in and start filling the program. And I remember that was pretty stressful. So I'd spend a day in Russian classes, and afterwards I would be emailing dozens of professors to ask them if they were willing to make an appearance at our conference. I think that was always one of the challenging parts of organizing these events. It was when you basically just had to start from scratch and just contact so many professors, and most of them would decline or they would never reply, but there would always be some that would be willing to spend their time talking to students. And in the end we managed to put together a program. I think about 150 people or so would attend, so it wasn't the largest event ever organized, but I think given the challenges we faced, and that a lot of the program was put together quite last minute, I was quite relieved that it turned out okay. So I remember, I mean, that time preparing was quite stressful, but then in the end, being there, seeing that it worked out, that was also extremely rewarding. Another challenging moment was the conference and General Assembly in London in 2014. The conference had been successful, I would say. Again, there were challenges. I mean, it was a really ambitious setup. We planned to sell, I think, around 500 tickets. I don't think we actually hit that figure, but we still managed to sell 400 tickets or so, which was quite remarkable for an event organized entirely by students. And because we were expecting so many participants, we had a program with up to 5 different sessions in parallel. So we'd have lectures, we'd have some academic panels where students themselves would present their work. We had some documentary screenings even, and I think mathematically it made a lot of sense based on the number of participants that we had. But I remember during the actual conference, I really wondered where those 400 people had gone, because some of the sessions, they were almost empty. We had a professor who had flown in from Germany on the day to give a lecture, and there were like 5 people in the room. I mean, that didn't feel great. I remember walking around trying to get some people into that room, but people were just scattered, and I don't know if people were enjoying the city or something else. But it was a lesson that we shouldn't be too ambitious and set up too many events at the same time. And at the end of the day, that you of course can't really control. Even if people have bought tickets, you can't fully control where they're all at. That was challenging in hindsight. And then after the conference, we'd have the General Assembly. So they would typically be combined. And yeah, so twice a year there'd be this academic conference followed by a general assembly. And the general assembly, I mean, they were of course about IAPSS internally, and they would only be attended by a pretty small number of participants, much less than the academic conferences, because this was really about, you know, policies of the association. So I think, you know, the average member didn't necessarily have an interest in that. So of course you'd have all the board members there. I mean, we were kind of required to attend. And then there would be a selection of members, I think many of which, you know, had been involved in IAPSS for a long time. They knew the history, and they would have their ideas of how they think IAPSS should be run. They may have also had their ambitions to become a part of the board themselves. And you know, during these general assemblies, this is also where board members would be elected, budgets approved, and overall plans discussed. And at this general assembly in London in 2014, I mean, I don't recall exactly what went wrong, but this general assembly turned out to be quite a disaster, I remember. My fellow, you know, board members and myself, I remember we were all tired, you know, having worked hard to prepare for the conference and then actually oversee the conference itself, and of course also some social events in the evenings. So we were really tired, and then there was this really negative mood during the general assembly that I'm not sure we fully understood, but there was just a lot of criticism, and you know, I'm sure people would have had valid concerns looking back, but at the time it just felt extremely demotivating. And as I mentioned before, motivation is key when you're, you know, working in an association run by volunteers. But we were just sitting there, and I don't know for how many hours that General Assembly lasted, but we were all getting pretty frustrated why we were getting so much criticism after we felt like we worked really hard to put, you know, together a good conference. And yeah, I don't know, it was almost like some people were just there to make noise. And we actually ended up ending the General Assembly earlier because we were just fed up, and we just had enough. That wasn't the proudest moment in my IAPSS career, but it was a memorable one. And I remember when we had a debrief later with the board, and you know, I remember discussing that. Imagine we would have been in an association for physics students or something. We'd probably just, you know, General Assembly, half an hour done, and let's get some beers. But of course, you bring together political science students. Of course, there's politics everywhere. So also when we, you know, had to discuss the internal governance of the association. But yeah, nonetheless, I mean, there had been some challenges, but I do really look back at this time and think of many positive memories, the you know, the different conferences, the trips. And you know, I think most of the events I participated in, they really struck the right balance between, you know, academic content and social interaction and having fun. And yeah, it was great to meet so many students with different backgrounds from all over the world. I mean, you'd have, you know, first year bachelor students, you know, like myself when I joined IAPSS, and then you'd have, you know, PhD students and everything in between. And really, I mean, the experience that I gained during this time, as I mentioned before, I think they've really helped me in my professional career. I think, you know, the leadership skills, organizational skills, collaboration skills that I've gained in IAPSS, that's definitely something that's helped me later on. And I think for that reason, I can only encourage others to become active in IAPSS. And you know, gain that experience and, you know, make a difference for fellow political science students.
Thank you so much for that detailed overview. I guess I do have a few questions, but in terms of that General Assembly, how many people attended on estimate there?
Yeah, so I think we'd be lucky when we had 50 people. I think often it would be below 30 probably. So it was really only a fraction of the number of participants that would be at the academic conference.
Okay, I see. Yeah, it's yeah, now we have to do our
Which of course raised the question, how representative those general assemblies were, right? I mean, of course, being political scientists, of course, democracy is a key topic. And imagine you've got a national election where the turnout is less than 10%. I mean, you wouldn't say that's very representative elections, but I guess in reality that's often what happened in IAPSS. But I'm sure that's that's not unique to IAPSS. I guess you have that in other associations as well.
Yeah, so we have to do the general assemblies online now, and as I mentioned to you before, we did some revisions to our what constitutes like memberships and stuff. We tried some new models, so that has helped a little bit increase the turnout. But yeah, it's definitely an area that we want to keep building on, and we're hoping that once things go back to in person, we can do kind of hybrid events where, especially for general assemblies, where we can maybe have part of the general assembly in person at a conference, but then have like a projector screen, and then folks from around the world can tune in, and then we can have that kind of larger audience. But it's kind of still a theory right now, so we're still waiting to hopefully test that out. Yeah, we're definitely hoping next year, but yeah, in terms of other organizations, I do have some good news. The medical students equivalent of IAPSS, PHMSA, we saw on YouTube, I think one of their recent general assemblies took about 3 days, and of just nonstop general assembly fun. So it sounds like there's quite a lot of activity there, and you can actually watch it on YouTube. So it's definitely exciting.
So you've disproven my anecdote then, right? That I thought it must be only political science students that spend so much of their free time debating in a general assembly, but clearly it's not limited to our discipline then.
Yeah, maybe we're one of the efficient ones. That would definitely be a good study topic anyway. But I guess, yeah, in terms of, I guess, focusing on your term as president, if you can pick maybe one thing that you're the most proud of in terms of whether it was like an achievement or just something on the day-to-day operations that you kind of reflect on and really appreciate, what would that kind of moment or that project be?
Yeah, so of course I've talked a lot about events already, right? So I could mention again that, one of those events, but maybe I'll refer to something more more general, because I've talked about motivation before, right? How it's important to keep everyone motivated, and I think as president you've got an important role to keep your fellow board members motivated and have people collaborate. Of course, occasionally there can be conflicts as well internally within the board potentially, or for example with members, as we saw at the General Assembly. And I think I've always been very much focused on collaboration, and if people would have different views, try to understand where do they come from, why do they believe that. And I think during my term that that focus on collaboration, I think that was really positive. There were some debates on our membership structure at the time. So I know you've recently revised this association membership structure, but this was at the time quite a hot topic as well, because basically the importance of individual membership was growing, and I think some of the associations, that some of which have been part of founding IAPSS, they could see that their influence was diminishing. So there were some tensions around that. And yeah, I mean, I did my best to kind of try and find middle grounds, to respect the wishes of the association members, but at the same time recognizing our growing number of individual members. So I think that was definitely an important part of my time, to kind of keep a positive atmosphere, keep motivation high, and at the end of the day, get us all to work together the best way to create some great content for the students.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, I know you work at a bank now, but would you be able to maybe tell us, for folks who are tuning in, a little bit about your career after IAPSS, what happened, and maybe if there are any skills in IAPSS you developed? I know you touched on leadership already, but anything that may really helped you in this journey after your life as a student?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think, one thing to reflect on first is that, there's a lot of different things you can do in IAPSS. Of course, there's, a strong academic part, whether it's the panels at conferences, or whether it's, some of the journals like Politicon. So if you're really into an academic career, there's some really good opportunities. That was never my core interest. So of course I had a interest in political science, but I don't think I ever pictured myself becoming a PhD student. I think I pictured myself rather working in private sector, and again, the experiences that I gained in IAPSS, so they were not so much academic, but much more organizational, and they need leadership, as I mentioned. So as I mentioned before, I moved to Copenhagen for my master's studies. During that time, I got a student job at a bank, and pretty soon after landing that student job, I was offered a full-time role to work as a project assistant. And after a few months, I got the opportunity to become project manager of the project. So I think that was quite a steep learning curve in the bank. And without the experience in IAPSS, I don't think I would have made that. Well, first of all, I'm not sure if I would have been hired, but second of all, it definitely helped me accelerate my career later on, right? So the fact that I'd organized all these trips, that meant I had some event management, project management experience, which I could then use. Again, collaborative skills, and finally leadership. I've had a number of different roles working at this bank now for the last almost 6 years, and I've had a lot of different leadership roles. The experiences that I've had at IAPSS have without a doubt helped me secure those roles and be successful in those roles. So for me, it's been a lot about practical experience. For others, it may be more about academic experiences. And I'm sure there will be others who are just there to have fun and meet other students. But whatever it is you want to get out of it, the choice is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. And hopefully that's inspiration for future political science students who might be looking to get more involved in IAPSS there. But I guess this is a good segue into, our next set of questions in terms of, if there is any advice that you would give political science students, whether they're in an IAPSS context or just maybe that they're just in their first year, they found this video and they're thinking about getting more involved in IAPSS activities, or maybe just career advice for them in general. What would you tell them, for both the present and future generations of political science students here?
So I think, studying, it's for me, it's not just about going to university. I spent a lot of time when I was studying doing other stuff. As I've reflected on, those experiences have been really useful. Go to a conference, go to a study trip, whatever it is, go to a summer school, but try and find those opportunities beyond the curriculum that's organized by your university, to meet new people, to exchange views, because you can learn so much more from just a lecture. Those 6-7 days I spent in Bosnia and later in Kosovo, I learned so much about those regions by being there, by meeting with so many people who shared their perspectives that sure, I could have read books, I could have attended normal university lectures, but it wouldn't have been the same experience. So I think really, even though it's been a good number of years, those memories, they still last. And again, the experience, that is something that you can use for the rest of your life. So of course, you gotta, at the end of the day, you gotta get your degree, you gotta attend classes, you gotta hand in your assignments. But if you have the opportunity to do something else beyond what your university offers, then I think you should go for it. And then I think IAPSS offers some really great opportunities that you should consider.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I definitely agree with, I guess, the more holistic experience of student life as well, and it can definitely endorse that too. So I guess our Secretary General, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, but who has usually asked questions about a sort of hypothetical situation where you're back in IAPSS in its 2022 and you're running for IAPSS president, and I guess, what would your platform be? But this is sort of a way of saying, what would you like to see in IAPSS for the future? What would your advice be to future representatives and team members in IAPSS who are serving in various roles around the world? And now it's not just the global level, but also the regional, kind of continental levels, and yeah, the various IAPSS departments, as I imagine you're aware of.
I mean, I guess one thing now looking back that I would say is really important is to consider, kind of the longer term. Of course, when you're in a board position, you're going to focus on, what impact can we make during this year. But at the end of the day, I mean, I've been active in IAPSS for about 3 years. It feels a lot longer, but 3 years at the end isn't that much, right? And that's that's the thing. People come and go, and I think it's really important for an organization like IAPSS to be resilient. And it's, of course, it's great when you've got a lot of good people, hardworking on board. But then what if all those people leave, right? You don't want everything to just die. So, think about the longer term and think about creating a structure that is resilient. Make sure that you've got always, new people joining, and give them an opportunity to be active. And when you're in the board in IAPSS, think about succession. Think about who could step into the role when you decide it's time to move on. I think maybe in my time that wasn't something that we sufficiently focused on, but yeah, I think that's really important to kind of think beyond your immediate term. Of course, focus on your immediate term. Focus on creating a nice portfolio of events and other opportunities. But yeah, think also about the long term to make sure that IAPSS will still exist for the next 25 years and hopefully many more years to come.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something I think we're really starting to we're starting to be cognizant about as we try to hand this off to the next generation of students who have, yeah, the new corporate seat in Canada there, to make sure that they know how to do things like fill the financial obligations, the reporting obligations, things like that. So yeah, definitely wise words. And
yeah, because if I could just add in, I mean, I think it's something that many, if you're just an IAPSS member and you haven't been part of the board, it's you maybe don't realize how much serious work actually needs to happen, right, to keep a website running, to organize an event, to administer budgets. I mean, there's a lot of administration, and some of the work is fun and some of the work maybe not so much, but still needs to be done. Yeah, I would definitely encourage people, if you have the motivation, to go for it. But I think it's important to be aware that it's not all fun, and there is some some administrative work that just needs to get done as well.
Absolutely. And yeah, hopefully we'll be able to kind of build that with the new office space in Montreal in the future, and focus a little bit more on that administrative side of things. But yeah, so I guess at this point, we kind of open it up to, so as this is also like a time capsule, so it might not, maybe as we kind of talked about before, students maybe years, decades in the future might look back to see what IAPSS was doing in 2015, 2016, and what that was like to serve in various positions in IAPSS. But I guess, is there any kind of concluding message that you would like to pass on to political science students who might be watching here? And yeah, whether it's this year as soon as this video hits our social media, or afterwards.
Well, I mean, if you're watching this, I assume you are familiar with IAPSS, and you have maybe you are already an active member. If not, then check out what they've got to offer. I'm sure there is something that IAPSS offers that will be something for you. And consider whether you maybe want to take on a role in the board at some point, organizing events, managing some of the journals, for example, or ultimately become IAPSS president. I mean, it's possible. IAPSS needs volunteers to function, and check it out and see if it's something for you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. So yeah, for I guess folks watching, it is February 19th, 2022, but you might be watching this a few weeks from now once this hits social media. And I think, yeah, during Jannick's time as president, social media and IAPSS went through some considerable increases, I believe. And yeah, I think it's one of the reasons that IAPSS has one of the largest followings of any student government in the world, I think, at this point, especially on Facebook there. That was, yeah, that's amazing for sure. And but thank you so much for your time here. And if yeah, we definitely invite folks to tune in to the other interviews in this series that have already been posted, and then we'll have some other ones coming after this. But if you have any questions for us, feel free to reach out at the email and listed on our YouTube account, and or the other social media platforms where this might be viewed, and we can definitely help you out there. But thank you so much for your time here, Jannick, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot, Justin.